Good evening and welcome to the October 4th version of the Kingman City Council. May I have roll call, please?
Mayor Anderson.
Present.
Vice Mayor Young.
Here.
Councilmember Abram.
Here.
Councilmember Carver.
Here.
Councilmember Dean.
Here.
Councilmember Miles.
Here.
Councilmember Yocum.
Good evening.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. This evening, the invocation will be given by John Poole of Praise Chapel, and we will follow with the pledge led by Councilman Carver.
Dear Heavenly Father, we come before you to open this Kingman City Council meeting by asking you to be present in this meeting. Father, we pray that you would give our leaders wisdom and understanding in guiding our city. Lord, we pray for prosperity and growth. Father, we pray for your protection upon our police and fire departments. And Father, we pray that your blessing would be upon this city in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to our nation's flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we have no minutes to approve tonight, so we'll jump to item number 2, awards and recognition. And Vice Mayor, if you would please call.
To you. Okay.
Go down and meet them.
All right. Keith Eaton, for 10 years of dedicated service to the city of Kingman, starting 7/31/2006.
I'll take a picture. If I can figure this out. Okay, cheese. Mayor, if I could also, Chief might have done 10 years with Kingman, but he had about 5 years with now NACFed, so he's actually been servicing the citizens of this community for about 15 years in the fire service. So thank you, Keith.
Thank you.
The next award goes to Joanne Longo for 10 years of service to the city of Kingman, starting 8/14/2006. Gary Higgins, for 10 years of dedicated service to the city of Kingman, starting 8/21/2006. Next award, Sherry Furr, for 10 years of dedicated service to the city of Kingman, starting 9/11/2006.
She's going to get you.
Okay. The next is Arthur Gastelum. Is Arthur here? Arthur is recognized for 18 years of outstanding service to the city of Kingman.
I do have a proclamation to read that I signed several days ago. It's for the Buddy Poppies by the Veterans of Foreign Wars. Whereas the annual sale of Buddy Poppies by the Veterans of Foreign Wars of the United States has been officially recognized and endorsed by government leaders since 1922, and whereas VFW Buddy Poppies are assembled by disabled veterans, and the proceeds of this worthy fundraising campaign are used exclusively for the benefit of the disabled and needy veterans and the widows and orphans of the deceased veterans. And whereas the basic purpose of the annual distribution of Buddy Poppies by the Veterans of Foreign Wars, Post 10386, is eloquently reflected in the desire to honor the dead by helping the living. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Richard Anderson, Mayor of the City of Kingman, Arizona, do hereby urge citizens of this community to recognize the merits of this cause by contributing generously to its support to the purchase of Buddy Poppies on the date set aside for distribution of these symbols of appreciation for the sacrifices of our honored dead, those days being November 11th and 12th, as VSW Buddy Poppy Days. Furthermore, I urge all patriotic citizens to wear a Buddy Poppy as a mood evidence of our gratitude to the men and women of this country who have risked their lives in defense of the freedoms which we continue to enjoy as American citizens. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the City of Kingman, Arizona, to be affixed the 27th day of September 2016. Item 3, call to the public. C. Russell.
Mayor, Council, my name is C. Russell. I was at the Historical Preservation Commission meeting last night, and something came up that I thought I should bring to your attention, perhaps. Kingman has an asset here that a lot of people don't know about, and it's not Route 66. But it's an asset that, if we're not careful, we could lose really easily. What was mentioned was that other cities have, or at least one other city, has hired a person to publicize Route 66. We have Jim Hinckley right here in town, who is probably the most informed authority on Route 66. And through conversations with some of the businessmen and Jim, it seems like it wouldn't take a whole lot to keep him here in town. And I'd really like to see him put on the city payroll, be it through Bureau of Tourism or Chamber of Commerce or whatever. He's done probably more in the last 2 years than what the Chamber has done in 10 years as far as bringing tourism into this town. And I think it would be a real shame to have some other city give him an offer that he couldn't refuse and get him away from here. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 4, the consent agenda. All matters listed here are considered to be routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be addressed separately. Are there any items the council wishes to poll and to discuss?
I move we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please call for the vote. Motion passes unanimously.
And Mr. Mayor, if I may, before we proceed to old business and new business each, If there's anyone here for a new business item exclusively A, 6A, parking issues, the gentleman who requested that on, or I requested that, but the gentleman who I requested that on the behalf of is not present here this evening. Apparently, there are some health issues within the family, and I will be requesting 6A, parking issues, new business item, be tabled for a later date.
So that's a motion.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please call for the vote.
Do we even need a motion on that if the person requesting the agenda item to remove it?
It's an either or. You can go just by your consensus to withdraw it, or if you want to have the motion, you can. Neither is necessary.
Since we have a motion and a second, we might as well go ahead and call for the vote.
That's to table item 6A, parking issues, new business, 6A. Sorry for the brief interruption.
Okay. Motion passes unanimously. Item 5A, old business building code clarification.
Mayor, I requested this to be put on the agenda. The last time we discussed this, council's direction was to use common sense. And when I conveyed that to Jim Mackerline, he kind of looked at me like, what do you want me to do? And so I decided to put it back on here for a little more clarification on that so that Gary, Jim, Carl, and I can sit down and give direction to the building inspectors as to, particularly on the older buildings in the downtown and elsewhere in town. As I stated before, if it's a new construction, I fully agree with following IBC code, but for older construction that's going to be extremely expensive and probably in some cases prohibitive to do, what is council looking for us to bring back to you?
Common sense.
I would suggest that we effect what is necessary, not necessarily just the, well, at least the bare minimum that is necessary as far as building code requires, but not gross expenditures beyond that. It depends on the circumstance. I would say, I don't know how you define common sense. I think it's, in many cases, is a case-by-case circumstance. Depends on, you know, if you're having to spend hypothetically $500 for a simple light switch, but it's not required, that to me doesn't seem like common sense. Case-by-case circumstances, but at least the bare minimum. As you put forth, I think you said that which is safe and
Health and safety issues.
Health and safety issues, yes. At least the bare minimum. Obviously, we have to follow that protocol. But beyond that, case by case, I don't know how you define common sense, but what would seem logical.
I would agree. To me, common sense, I guess, is can be defined in many ways. To me, health, safety, and ADA compliance is critical. I believe that if we run into a situation where the roof is falling down, just saying people can wear hard hats in the building isn't common sense. But if the fact that tearing some sheetrock off and redoing sheetrock is better than a full rebuild, and yet it still meets safety guidelines, you know, it's like Councilman Yocum said, it's every building is going to be different in their own way. but we have to meet a minimum criteria of health, safety, and ADA compliance, in my opinion.
While we're on ADA, does the council have an issue with infringement on the city's right-of-way to put those ramps in?
I think it's important that we accommodate ADA at any reasonable cost, basically.
Okay.
Councilwoman Miles?
Well, I certainly agree with the comments, but I also understand the difficulty of deciding what is health, safety, and, well, ADA is not difficult, but I have to question whether some of this could be handled. You said that your preference is for the staff to modify the ordinance. Now, I'm not exactly sure what that means, but perhaps that is what we should suggest. And also, I have a question, which is, there's a lot of discussion, including tonight, on development districts. There's discussion on historical districts. There's been comments on the entertainment district. We have a lot of district discussion, and isn't there a way to accommodate some of the concerns in the development of these districts so that there can be variations to the stringency of some of these codes? And I know we did ask for a review of that for the other cities that might have different types of code adherences depending on the district.
Comment?
Something we can definitely look into to try and address and see if there's a way to do that.
I've looked at Havasu and Bullhead, and whereas Havasu has a pretty defined downtown like we do, but they're a much newer community, and they go strictly by the IBC with no exceptions. Bullhead, I really couldn't find something comparable, so.
Well, I'm just thinking, larger than Mojave County, this must be addressed, and especially communities that have historic downtown areas that are aging and have these concerns.
I think the problem that I have seen stems from the condition of the building when a new buyer is looking to acquire that building, that the maintenance hasn't been done. And to bring it up to code, there's a lot of additional things. And unfortunately, the new owner would bear the cost. What's been done in a couple of instances, and the city manager told me that there was a potential buyer for a couple storefronts that had significant issues to do what he wanted to do there. Mm-hmm. He was able to find a building just across the street where most of those conditions didn't exist. So part of the issues we're going to run into is the condition of the building because of poor maintenance. And I know that's not an excuse, but as we're trying to work with the downtown district and wherever, we have to realize those conditions.
Well,
and we just can't say they can do anything they want, but we have to be reasonable.
Well, certainly, but even last night at the Historical Preservation Commission, where they're looking at a landmark building program that is optional for the owners, it offers, if you opt into it as a landmark building, there could be funding options and grant options that don't exist if you're not in it. So there just seems to me that these types of things could help allay some of the upgrade cost, and we need to look at that holistically because I agree, common sense should be used, but in the end, we need these programs and specifications to help people know that there are resources available to help them upgrade these buildings.
If I may add, I would agree that this probably needs to be, there needs to be more written direction, because as an inspector, you inspect a criteria, and it's quite difficult to not pass or fail based on that criteria. So the more we can put into a written clarification or written direction is, it'll just facilitate things down the road, and hopefully make it a little easier for our inspector, and for those that are willing to pull permits, could have a criteria sheet in front of them prior to purchasing a building.
Just kind of to jump in there, statutorily, that's pretty much required anyways when you're looking at the permits, the building. There's some statutes under Title IX that make sure that any of the burdens that we're putting on developers, businesses, or whatever needs to have a written policy, so those people will be able to look and see and understand exactly what you're looking for, aside from just, the common sense enforcement tactics. So if we have something in writing, it's much more.
I have a comment. Yes. I know several months ago that the Board of Adjustments Committee was looking at the IBC codes. We had approved them, and they had a list of some recommendations and possible changes that they wanted to see. Has anybody gotten with them, or have they brought any recommendations to you?
Have they? I've been going back and forth with Toby Orr for probably a year and a half, but he has never sat down with me to discuss what the builders are looking for, and that's why I asked. I don't know if they've talked to Gary or not.
Okay. I know I was at a meeting with Toby and the whole committee, and they were discussing them pretty thoroughly. And it was my impression that they were bringing it to you. Did they, Gary? No. No. Okay. You may get with them to see what some of those suggestions were. It may help with some of your common sense issues.
Okay. Thank you.
Mayor, I'll make a comment, then I'll go off on some things I've heard. When I was in law enforcement, it was always said, it's the spirit of the law, not the letter of the law. When you're telling people they need to improve the building twice as much as it's worth, that's not common sense.
No.
When you're telling people to replace something that is still in functional order, that doesn't need to be replaced, that still meets code, that's not common sense. It's also a case on the city side, and again, I'm just going off of what I've heard from talking with people that's had to go through some of this, is you can't constantly be changing the rules of the game. Don't come inspect my property, tell me what I need to do, and I do it, and then come back and tell me I need to do something else.
Right.
We need to be forthright with our customers out there on giving these building permits to them. Give them something in writing. I mean, again, I'm just going off of hearsay third party of what I've been told, but I don't like what I hear. So when I hear the issue that what is common sense, I'm beginning to believe, okay, maybe the person does need a little guidance on common sense. But we are basically, it appears from my perspective, running people off from development in our downtown area or in our area in Kingman in general, because we're trying to stick so close to the IBC code instead of taking that code and coming up with our alternatives and falling back to what John said, public safety and health first and foremost.
Absolutely. That was well said. I just want to say that was well said.
I just have another comment that the IBC codes are guidelines, and we can accept them, or some of them we don't have to accept. And I know they can go through and maybe look and see which ones we don't need for our specific town. So they may do that.
I wanted to second what Mr. Carver said too. I know Mr. Jepson and his whole crew, it's a tough job that they have. But when I first became a council member, heard a lot of upset people too that were not that business friendly, and I just wish we could have some guidelines that maybe could freshen that up a little bit and make it a little easier and be known as a community that we are business friendly and pro-business, that we want you to come to Kingman. So.
I don't know how this ties into one of Mr. Doherty's objectives, but submitting a permit and doing some work and then waiting on a response on another item, I think when the permit is submitted, I thought the objective was there would be one review and everything that is an issue with the permit would be handled upfront at one time, and there wouldn't piecemeal changes. So I would just ask to follow up on that and see if some of this discussion would be taken care of by your objective of having one review, one shot. If you didn't remember it, too bad. So, I would ask you to take a look at that and let us know. Councilwoman?
I'll go back to last night's meeting. There was an example given of a sign that was going to be purchased for a building, and it took 4 months to get the sign because of the way the codes are written. Well, the example given by one of the members of the commission was if this program, and I'm going to just say, there are ways that we can simplify or make new opportunities. If this program existed, that I hope will come forth pretty soon, you can create signs like that, given that you're a part of this landmark building. And I'm not saying it's a panacea. I'm just using it as an example of types of things that we need, tangible things that give options that we don't currently have. And so anything to expedite may include a new program, may include district changes, zoning changes, whatever. We're going to discuss that. But I really think rather than, yes, we need common sense, and yes, we also need these types of programs and variations on a theme, if you will, that will help people know what the rules are, and also get resources to help them upgrade their buildings.
I'd say as well as limit a developers or the building owners or business owners' costs, as well as their time frame, their
Right.
time developing or fixing up the property.
Well, we don't have those resources to offer at this time,
No,
but we need to work on getting those in place so that
We can help minimize the
Their
effect
cost.
on and be as business friendly as possible.
One optimistic note, too, that I had one businessman comment that's been in business here quite a long time, that he's worked with the city over the years and has hardly ever had an issue with the building and permit department, and so he's been very happy with it. So, heard both sides.
good.
Mr. Doherty, do you think that you had sufficient information that you and your staff and perhaps the attorney can draft something for putting it in writing?
I have my notes, and we will sit down and discuss it and see what we can come up with to clarify for the building inspectors what we're looking for, and we will bring it back to the council for final approval when it's done.
Okay. Thank you. Is that sufficient for the council?
Yes.
Item 5B, consideration of initiating a zoning ordinance text amendment and a zoning map amendment to create a downtown development district and apply this district to the zoning map. Good evening, Mr. Jepson.
Good evening. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, as you recall that this item was tabled from the last meeting because you wanted to meet with some people. This is a response to a council request to look at the John Cook plan and to be able to follow up on a presentation made on August 9th about it. We wanted to clarify that the John Cook plan. It's not a plan that was adopted by the city, but is a workbook, and we looked at that as we developed this particular district. Currently, in our downtown area, we have a C1, C2, and C3 zoning districts, and so, well, let me say we have a C2 and a C3, and the C2 refers back to the C1. So what we did with this is we took all the uses allowed in those districts and then left out a few of them which are not appropriate for the downtown, such as a contractor storage yard, BMX track, and marijuana dispensary, because it doesn't meet the spacing requirements on the dispensaries. Other changes that are proposed in this particular district is the minimum lot size. Currently, the original platted lots in the downtown area are 25 by 125 feet. So this particular zoning district is proposing that the minimum lot size, instead of being 7,500 square feet like it is in the rest of C2, C3, it is 3,125 square feet. Also in this district, we're proposing not to enforce off-street parking requirements. Many of our businesses are downtown and don't have off-street parking lots. Historically, they've depended on the streets for parking, and we propose in this district that it not be required. This district does not have any architectural control or review boards or anything in it. It does not affect the historic overlay district that is currently in place. Some of the comments we heard on the previous agenda item, if that's our historic preservation district is an obstacle to development, we probably should look at that district. Here is a proposed boundary of the downtown development district. As you can see, it just starts up El Travador Hill and goes west to West Beale Street, as most of our commercially established areas today. So at this point, the council can decide if it'd like to initiate such a zoning district. If so, we would then advertise and have a public hearing at the Planning and Zoning Commission on November 8th. Then the council could consider on December 6th, or the other option the council has is not to proceed with this any further. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions the council may have on this item.
Mr. Jepson, I know that you did a lot of work with Mr. Wanner to get to this point. I know that there was a meeting this past week, and I will ask Mr. Doherty, as a result of that meeting, do you see any significant issues with the proposal?
No, at the conclusion of that meeting, I don't believe that the attendees had any real issues. They had been listening to rumor and innuendo, and that Gary presented it to them, and they did not have any issues at the end of that meeting. I do have a question about when you go up El Trovador Hill, how can they not have off-street parking? Because there is nowhere else to park once you're up there.
Well, I don't know exactly what you're speaking of, but the Quality Inn has it, the restaurant next to it has it, Walgreens have it, the veterinary clinic have off-street parking, and if you'd like to extend, this is a time which we can discuss the boundaries for it, but that was the feeling, was that the downtown was those areas that have been historically here, whereas when cars were seldom and few between, and people walked from the downtown Platte residential areas to the stores here. So,
I personally am a big advocate, proponent for this. I feel it's overdue, and that this will help us. I'm excited to see downtown move forward faster, better, and this will help us remove roadblocks, help the city get on board with helping downtown redevelop. I don't see that it adds any impediments. It doesn't require specific colors, anything of the sort. I think it only assists downtown development and people who want to help fix up downtown and move in, establish businesses downtown and help revitalize it. I move that we send this forward to
I
planning
think
and
Lindsay
zoning.
wants to speak.
If there are no other
I
comments.
think there were.
But I move that we.
I do have someone that has requested to speak, and I think it's necessary to make a comment here, because as was mentioned, there's a lot of rumors, a lot of innuendos on both sides. I again want to compliment Mr. Jepson, who met with both sides. There was very constructive discussion. Both sides has some points that they want to be involved in communication as we move forward. And from that standpoint, it was very positive, even though we had to have separate meetings. I think what you're hearing was the outcome was pretty much what we were looking for. So I really don't like to hear we had meetings in the dark and this side doesn't like me and all that. That didn't happen. We addressed the issues. The concerns, what they were concerned about wasn't part of the submission, so that part, their biggest heartburn went away right away. So those half dozen were satisfied with the procedure where we've been. With that, I have Travis Lingenfelter, who's requested to speak.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council members. Travis Lingenfelter, 1006 Valley View. Just a couple of questions I had regarding this. I'm glad to see it going forward. I was curious about how the boundaries were really created on the map. Wondering if the boundaries of the recent entertainment district were taken into account as far as overlapping, and if there's any sort of benefit to considering that. And also, great to hear that you met with the property owners that own all the buildings downtown. I think, personally, I believe it's a little bigger than just the property owners. This is something that affects all of the citizens. Don't know if I saw public meetings on this, asking for or soliciting public comments that may be valid, that maybe you would want to include into this. It's bigger and affects more people than just the people that own the property. It's all of us. And I think that all the citizens of Kingman should probably be given an opportunity to at least attend some sort of a public meeting and provide some public comments as a part of this. Thank you.
I have Mr. Jepson respond to the boundaries, and also I think he mentioned that this does go through a public hearing process, which would alleviate your other concern.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, members of the public, we did look at the entertainment district. Not all the entertainment district is included, because when the entertainment district was formed, the requirements and restrictions was how far were certain businesses from schools and churches, and with that, and in this particular district, to include the high school and the churches and things was not necessary for the commercial development. And so, yes, we did look at the entertainment district, but they're not the same boundaries, because we had included such places as Palo Christi School and St. Mary's Church and those other churches in the entertainment district for the spacing requirement that we're trying to achieve with the entertainment district. We will notify all the property owners within the proposed boundary, as well as all the property owners within 300 feet by first-class mail. Plus, we will notify in the Kingman Dating Minor at least 15 days prior to each public hearing in a 1/8 page advertisement, display ad that will have public hearings on this particular district. We've tried to provide all the property owners who we've met with a full copy of the entertainment district and the boundary map.
Mr. Jepson, you mentioned providing that to the Daily Miner, you provide that to the Standard also?
We can, we're not hesitant, just that the Kingman Daily Miner is the official newspaper publication. That's why we are required by our statute to advertise there.
Mr. Lingenfelter, did that help you?
Mayor Anderson, and thanks, Gary, for the clarification. When it comes to the public interaction, what I was really thinking, I understand that it has to go through a public hearing process, but many other communities in the state, they have a meeting set specifically for public engagement, not a formal sort of a hearing process, but actually inviting the citizens to come in to share this exciting thing that you're about to do, and what would you like to see as a part of it? Not taking exception to this or that, but just soliciting public input. That would be the single purpose of the meeting. Thank you.
Okay. Councilman Yocum, you were about to make a motion?
I was. If there's no one else wanting to speak to the matter, I wish to forward this to P&Z for the public hearing process. Move that we move this forward.
Second.
I have a motion and a second.
I look at this as just another layer of bureaucracy getting in the way of development. I had a conversation this morning with an individual that it seems like this process went backwards. There has not been a buy-in from all the downtown owners at this point in time. We've got the Historical Preservation District. We've got other avenues in place other than creating another entirely new layer to be placed upon the ownership downtown. We can work within our current codes and change those if we feel that it's necessary. But I don't see where this is necessary. It is just another layer that is not going to promote growth. It is going to stunt growth.
Well, like every item on the agenda, just about, I've heard both sides. And last night I heard very, very strongly from one of the property owners that the best thing the city can do is get out of the way. I've heard that very strongly for several times. But I think, I do think that taking this through the public hearing process and getting more information and more input from those people, it will be an opportunity for them to speak and for us to hear various sides of the issue. So given that, I really support moving forward and hearing and letting the dialogue take place.
I believe that this initiative actually does the opposite, not adds another layer of bureaucracy, but helps the city be a proponent and be on board with downtown development and patronize it, but and thereby at the same time also remove some of the restrictions that are in place as part of the general plan and allow for some exceptions where downtown is different from the rest of the city and is a special circumstance, and we allow some exceptions and actually helps us get out of the way and be less restrictive where downtown is concerned rather than more restrictive.
Mr. Jepson, what is the projected timetables for the public hearing process?
Sorry, I took off by, there will be a public hearing if you choose in November for the Planning and Zoning Commission, and December 6th would be the City Council's public hearing, and if the council chose to adopt an ordinance that night, it would go into effect 30 days thereafter if there's not a referendum filed.
Okay, so November and December.
Yes. November 8th, like election day, is with the Planning and Zoning Commission public hearing.
Okay. In response to Mr. Lingenfelter's suggestion of having a more open public forum to discuss it. I do think that there would be time to do that, whether the council initiates that or whether the public initiates that is something that maybe can be discussed offline to look into that, so that perhaps that could take place.
Certainly.
Downtown needs the city's assistance. This is one way to help provide it. If there's no further discussion, I'll call for the question.
Did we get a second?
Yes.
Yes. Please call for the vote.
Mine didn't come up.
Mine didn't come up
I
yet.
refreshed and it did.
Come on.
Mine's not coming up.
Hit refresh.
I did, several times. It says request desktop site.
See that one?
Yep, it is not coming up. Now I went back to, oh, now it came up.
Motion passes 6-1. And we'll move on to item 5C. Review the Kingman Airport Authority contract.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. At the last council meeting, the council directed me to seek out some options to hire an attorney to review the contract. I made some phone calls, talked to some city attorneys to get some recommendations on some attorneys that would be versed in contract and airport law. I spoke to a number of them. I tried to keep things, in state because just trying to keep the costs down. There was a number of recommendations from some bigger firms outside of the state, but I didn't think we wanted to go there at that point. Basically by narrowing it down, talking to some of these folks, these are the folks that were available or that were interested in doing it, as well as a couple of them had retired or are in public service and can't do this kind of work. The mayor did ask me to add Tom Horn to the list. So what I did is basically spoke to those three folks that I came up with, provided a bio. They're all interested. So it's just a matter of what the council would be recommending after obviously reading the bios to see what their backgrounds are.
I have a couple, at least a brief question. There are three proposed vendors for the service presented. All three, I presume, are, I mean, it goes without saying
Hit this X.
that they are all licensed throughout the state. Are
Correct.
all three willing to, that I see that all three are down in the metropolitan area
Correct.
of the state. All three are willing to work up here.
Correct.
If necessary to commute or whatever, or become intimately acquainted with Kingman locality and
Right. I would think a majority of the work is just going to be transactional. They're just going to review paperwork and documents, so it doesn't necessarily require travel up here, but at some point in time, yes, they would do that.
okay, all three are willing. Thank you.
I reviewed some of their bios. I thought that the Lydiard and Faith was the only ones that had the airport and aviation experience. Is that right?
Yeah, Van Ripper had some basic background with the airport. She's a contract attorney, I think, for Winslow. And then Faith as well, and he's also a vice mayor in Litchfield, so he's kind of aware of the political issues involved with this sort of situation, so.
Mr. Mayor? So do any of these people have personal knowledge or have ever met anyone within our Kingman Airport Authority?
To the best of my knowledge, no, but what would happen is when you hire retained counsel, they'll do a conflict check to see if they've represented those, represented those parties, but they may have knowledge of who they are. Like I say, Faith, I don't know personally. Tom Horn, I don't. Van Ripper, I've met on occasion because she's a contract city attorney. So I do know who she is, but other than that, I'm not aware of their contact with anybody in this community. I know Tom Horn's done some litigation in the past up here, but whether or not he's got a relationship with anybody out at the airport, I did not ask that question.
Having myself reviewed the 3 different bios, I, personally, even though they're a little bit more expensive than Van Ripper, I think Faith fits the bill with some of their experience.
I felt the same way.
Well, when I talked with him, I know he's a pilot, so it adds kind of that different perspectives, as well as negotiated contracts and master leases with airports. So it does give you kind of that very rounded view.
And it appears all of his education and background is in Arizona, so he has a lot of experience in Arizona, in Arizona and in the areas of interest.
I think I was in elementary school when he was practicing earlier, which I didn't know when we had the conversation.
My only question would be was Tom Horn the Attorney General when Dave French was on council and vice mayor?
I don't know. I'm trying to think of the years that overlapped, and maybe, but I don't know. I didn't think to look to see when he was the Attorney General and when those offices
I think
overlapped.
he was 2010 to 14 Attorney General.
Could be, yeah. So then I would say no.
I recognize that that this procurement would fall under professional services, but I don't know that it's tremendously, the need for it is extraordinarily expeditious, you've got to get it done immediately or tonight. How long might it take to get RFPs back from
Well,
each?
I didn't do an RFP, and I wasn't looked into an RFP because, one, it's professional services. Two, I would suspect that the cost would not exceed what would normally be required for council authorization. So this would fall under more of the informal process. So
I do have someone that wishes to speak on the item, Mr. Lingenfelter.
You, Mayor Anderson, council members, Travis Lingenfelter once again. I really just have 3 questions. Curious, I worked for city and county government for many times, and Tom Horn, one of the candidates that you were looking at, was in fact a prior Attorney General for the state of Arizona. I'm curious why the council and Attorney Cooper has not chosen instead to first refer this contract for an outside legal review and opinion from the Arizona State Attorney General's office. Many cities in the state have done that. They will actually provide a free legal review. By way of comparison, I know that Tom Horn's hourly rate is about $450 an hour, which is pretty steep for a city that is struggling with paying for many, many different things, for many public services. It would just seem logical to me that prior to going outside and paying for a private attorney, that you would want to get a free legal review and opinion from the state attorney general's office. So I was just wondering why that didn't happen. My second question would be, at what point will the scope of services for this professional services contract be released to the public? Which questions is the individual that you retain? What are the specific questions that they're going to need to answer? I think that's pretty important. And then I think Councilman Yoakum asked the third question I would have, which is what is the time of performance for this contract? Thank you.
Mr. Cooper, I know we've discussed in the past about trying to get a preliminary opinion or thought from the Attorney General on issues, and Mr. Lingenfelter's comment about trying to get an opinion from the from the current Attorney General?
One, it's not as easy as it sounds. We've made that request in the past not for this, but generally the Attorney General is not going to address these local issues unless there's something that is of statewide concern. You can always ask, which is what we've done in the past, but there's always that refusal because they have their job duty, which is to represent the state, not the municipalities. But, if the council directs me to ask the Attorney General, I'll ask the Attorney General.
I just think it's a little premature just to assume that they wouldn't. I know for a fact that there's another statewide contracting agency in the city here where the AG actually did come out and issue an opinion on them several years ago. I think it was in 2004, or 2005, 2006. So they do take on those issues. I was a past procurement director for the county. I've spoken with people in the AG's office before. They do get involved in these types of contract issues. So.
I think as I look through the qualifications of the three that you provided, I think they're all exceptional. I think we need to consider what it is, in fact, that we are really looking for, and that is there legal substance to challenge in the current contract? And it's the legality of the contract, not necessarily the initial work that was done by the users group as to, yes, it's a one-sided contract, but really didn't come up with anything legally. So I think from that standpoint, and reiterate why I mentioned consideration of Mr. Horn, I think as I look into that, we are definitely talking contract law is the primary issue. Aviation law is important. But to be able to have the resources to address what issues or areas to look into and to be able to have those contacts. And it looks like, from what I've seen, that at least the top two can do that. I don't know about the third one down. So.
Yeah, she's a sole proprietor.
I'm sorry?
Sole proprietor.
And I assume she has the capability for any technical assistance to provide that.
Yes, sir.
I have a comment. Since there really hasn't been a rush in the past, I think Travis has a valid recommendation there to go to the current Attorney General to see if they would
No
intervene.
objection, Your Honor.
Any idea as far as how long that might, going through that?
I don't recall the response time. We did it in the past. 30 days is a rough estimate.
2 meetings.
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's do that.
Okay.
Because what I can do is draft a request, and then when I get a response, I'll let you know.
I'll make a motion that we contact the, is it Brnovich?
The Attorney General?
Yeah, Attorney General, as far as seeing if he can do any sort of contract review where the Kingman Airport Authority is concerned.
No problem.
I'll second that.
Point of order, that's not an agenda item.
It's not, but we,
Can we actually make a
Direction.
motion on that? The
What-
agenda item was to decide on these three along that way.
These were the three that I recommended. Yes, it's not on the agenda for that person specifically, but it's to retain Airport Authority Counsel. So if you want someone other than the three that I've listed, I don't think that's a violation of the open meeting law.
Then I will amend the motion to to reflect a tabling of going with one of the three prospective vendors, and in lieu thereof, in the interim, contact the Attorney General and see if he is willing to review the Kingman Airport Authority contract.
Yes, sir.
That's
Is that
sufficient.
acceptable?
It's acceptable, yes, sir.
And the second?
I'll amend that second.
Okay. Any further discussion?
I guess just a question. What is the professional services requirements that when a city is required to start disclosing those at what level expense, or instead of just moving forward, like if it's under a procurement amount?
The procurement levels for, I'd have to remember the number off the top of my head, for council approval is 50,000. But this is something obviously that we're all involved with, that it will always be brought back to the council for that direction regardless of the cost, so.
Any further discussion? Please call for the vote. Okay, motion passes 6-1. And we'll move on to new business. 6A has been tabled. 6B, consideration of retaining Buxton to develop a retail development strategy.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, in our budget for this fiscal year, the city council has budgeted $60,000 to retain a firm for a retail development strategy. We sent out requests for proposal and statements of qualifications. We received responses from 4 firms. All 4 firms were interviewed by the Economic Development and Marketing Commission, and afterwards, they recommend to the council that we retain Buxton for $60,000 for this service. So I think attached in your packet are the proposals that were submitted, and Cody Gunstenson from Buxton is here tonight if you have any questions for him. And be happy to try to answer any questions for the council that you may have.
I went through all of them, and I agree with staff's recommendation. Thought they were the most qualified, too.
I was actually in attendance at the meeting, the EDMC meeting, and I would be in full agreement of their recommendation.
I was at the meeting also, and I had a concern with the answer to one question, but I understand it was resolved later, and that was as they come up with the strategy to determine who to market to, how to market, that they would not be active in helping recruit. But I understand that that was answered subsequently, that yes, they would be part of that process too.
Correct.
So I feel better about that.
And this is just a 1-year?
It is. It's a 1-year contract.
Does it have options, or?
You have options in subsequent years for $50,000.
Seemed like,
Actual year is 60.
did it seem like other cities mostly did 3 years? Is that, I
Well,
don't know why I'm thinking that.
One of our challenges is one council cannot obligate another council
Oh,
beyond
okay.
it. So
Okay.
you would need to look and renewal. I hope I'm not overstepping Mr. Attorney. So you'd have to look at another contract in the following year.
Okay,
in
that
order
makes
to
sense.
consider.
All right, I understand.
Mr. Doherty?
Additional comment is that it's 60,000 the first year because they will also help with tourism development. And then beyond that, the 50,000 goes back to strictly working on retail development and throughout the city.
Thank you.
If we don't have anyone wanting to speak, I'd make a motion to accept the recommendation for Buxton as, for the amount of $60,000 for a one-year contract to help improve our retail development strategy as well as tourism.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Do I have any further discussion? Seeing as there is none, please call for the question. We have a unanimous vote. Item 6C, adopt a public notice to hold a public hearing for a sewer rate reduction.
Okay, good evening, Mayor and council members. So about a year ago, staff was asked to request from WIFA to refinance our Hilltop wastewater treatment plant loan. We sent that request in, and WIFA immediately notified us that they would not recommend approval of a refinance, but that they would recommend an alternative. They understood that our customers are experiencing a rate burden. They also understand that we are having difficulty funding our 5-year CIP program. So what they said was they will allow us to prepay that Hilltop wastewater treatment plant loan with the debt service reserves that we had set aside, that we were required to set aside and not spend for the entire term of that loan. They would allow us to tap into that and prepay the Hilltop loan. In doing that, we would reduce our interest costs over the remaining term of that loan by $1 million, as well as reduce our annual debt payment by over $400,000. What they said was we needed to identify how we were going to spend that $400,000. They were providing that exception for the reason of the burdens on us, so we needed to identify how we were going to spend that. So in February, Council had asked that yes, we will revise our request and align it with the WIFA recommendation, and we'll identify spending those savings on providing a rate reduction. So in April, the WIFA board approved that request, and in July, we made that prepayment. So our fiscal year 17 debt payment will be reduced by over $400,000. So we are now at that point of determining how we are going to allocate that savings to our customers. At September's Municipal Utilities Commission meeting, I provided this presentation and asked them to please provide a recommendation to you as far as the option of as far as the sewer rate reduction option, and they did so. And when we get to those rate reduction options, I will provide you with the details on their recommendation. So quickly, just to review our current sewer rates and rate structure, we have 3 components to our sewer rates. We have our fixed charges, which are our monthly base rate, and our capital renewal fee. Those fees are charged to every single customer. It does not matter what type of customer you are. It does not matter how many gallons of water that you use. We also have a variable charge, which is our user rate, and that does vary based on the type of user that you are, as well as by how many gallons of water that you use. At the bottom of this screen, I have some numbers on our sewer customers, and I bring that up just because we designed and constructed these treatment plants, the Hilltop and the Downtown, and allowed for, or designed them to allow for some significant growth. And as you'll see in these numbers, back in '08, when that design and construction of the upgrade was being done, or just after that, our customer base, our sewer customer base was 8,878. 4 years later, we only increased connections by 250. 4 years after that, at the end of fiscal year 16, we are now at 9,921. So we had a pretty good increase over that 4 years. But when you look at the last 8 years overall, 45% of that growth it occurred in fiscal year 15 and fiscal year 16. For that 6-year period, it was very, very sluggish. And I bring that up because we had large rate increases over a period of time. And it was during that fiscal year 09 to fiscal year 13 period. So just looking at the increases during those years, in February of 09, all users were paying that fixed rate of $9.49. Today, you'll see it is at $27.80. And as an example for user rates, residential users paid $1.93 per 1,000 gallons used, and they are currently paying $5.66 per 1,000 gallons used. Restaurants, for example, they were paying, $5.42 per 1,000 gallons used, almost $16 now per 1,000 gallons used. So you'll see. But again, we had to increase those rates because we did not get the connections to spread that debt payment across the board. So the existing customers, unfortunately, had to absorb that rate burden. We have not raised rates since January of 2013. So the different options that I have come up with, and there are probably many other ways to come up with the options, but these are the 5 that I have come up with. So at the very top of this schedule, you'll see our WIFA Hilltop annual debt payment in 16, and then projected out from 17 to 21. And then the savings in that debt payment is just below that over the course of those next 5 years. So the first 2 options, which are in blue, are options that will reduce the rates for all customers across the board. And then the bottom 3, which are in green, will reduce the rates for strictly residential customers. So looking at option 1 and option 2, those both are a reduction in the base rate, so that fixed charge. And the only difference between the 2 is that the first one says, all right, we're just going to give a $3 reduction overall across the board in the monthly base rate. And you'll see as we increase customers, the reduction in revenues is also going to increase over that 5-year period. Looking at option 2, we're saying, all right, let's not do a flat rate, let's do a variable rate based on the customers we have during that current fiscal year. So again, as we increase customers, the dollar amount reduction is going to be less because we're allocating that $400,000 across more customers. So that's really only the only difference between the 2. And then option 3 and option 4, same methodology as 1 and 2, just that it's going to be applied to residential customers and not commercial customers. And then option 5 actually reduces the user rate instead of the base rate, and for residential users. And this is the option that the Municipal Utilities Commissioners, or the Commission, recommended. And they chose this option because they said that the customer will be able to decide more. Let me phrase this right. We'll be able to have more of an impact on the dollar amount of savings that they can actually put in their pocket, because it's not just a flat $3. If they conserve water, they will actually get more than that $3 per month, or $3.22 or $3.33, whatever that might be. And so it kills 2 birds with 1 stone. They'll conserve water, possibly, and they get a rate reduction. So that was the reasoning behind option 5. And of course, I need to provide this information to you as well. So when we look at the next 5 years and we look at our revenue and expense projections and the fiscal impact, and I'm using option 5 just because that's what the commission recommended, the dollar amount, the variances between all of the options is minimal, so the impact really, it doesn't matter what option I use in my illustration. And I have 3 areas that I have pointed out because those are the only areas that this particular rate reduction is going to impact. Our operating expenses aren't going to change based on this decision. Our non-operating revenues are not. Only a very small portion of our operating revenues, and our debt payment is going to, our debt payment has changed. So the very top arrow is our sewer user fees projected if we did not give a rate reduction option. So when we look at that second arrow where the user fees are boxed, that shows, and we'll use fiscal year 18 because fiscal year 17 only is going to project out with 6 months of a rate reduction. So let's use fiscal year 18. We look and see that the projection without the rate reduction is $5.4 million in user revenues, and with the rate reduction option, it's $5 million. So a difference of that $400,000. And then when we look at the very bottom at the WIFA debt payments, you'll see a decrease in the WIFA debt payment of $400,000. So really the fiscal impact is just about 0. And it's the same for fiscal years 19 through 21. And then we are required to meet loan coverage ratios. And those loan coverage ratios are 1.5 times, and you'll notice that projecting out to 21, the very lowest is 1.76 all the way up to 1.87, so we have no issues with that. Those loan coverage ratios are healthy. And then looking at our fund balance analysis and looking out to fiscal year 21, you'll see that we have an ending fund balance unrestricted of $6.4 million. And that takes into consideration funding all of our funded CIP projects, which is only about 50% of the program over the 5-year period. And it also takes into account setting aside 180 days worth of operating expenses, transfers, debt payments, etc. So just there is no difference in our ending fund balance if we were to incorporate this option or not. Because again, the net effect is 0. So, and then just quickly, a quick review of our sewer 5-year CIP. The red fonted items are the unfunded projects, and the items that are in black font are our funded projects. So you'll see it's about 50%, just under 50% that we currently have in our 5-year CIP that are funded. So then just lastly, a proposed timeline if you do choose this evening to adopt a public notice to hold a public hearing for a particular rate reduction. That would be holding a public hearing on the 15th of November and then incorporating that decrease effective January 1st.
I guess my question would start with the what did we call it, the Community Improvement Plan, Capital Improvement Plan. For years, we had very small amounts. We met the requirements of the covenants of the contract. I see that we're going to be significantly increasing them. And whereas I'm sure there's needs, I'm not sure what level of need. And I guess that's something I'd really want to know is how critical when we get into $4, $13, $11 million and fund what, $6 million 1 year, what, 18, 19. As we plan to fund that, is it a critical item? Is it an item that should be paid for by the city, or is it an item that should be paid or by a developer. And if we go that route, that takes away the opportunity to reduce rates in those years unless we have a significant increase in customers. Because I don't think your operating expenses are going to change. Your loan repayment's not going to change. So I guess that would be a question that when we come back in November, could we kind of have a review of the capital projects that we're looking at funding, realizing if we do this, it keeps us from reducing the rates further. So we know that what the impact is that we go one way or the other.
Do you have an estimate at all what somebody could possibly save? $3 a month, not very much if you went with option 5
About $42 to $45 a year.
a year. That's still $4 a month. Can you, I may have missed that or not, I don't know. That 400,000 a year, could you put that back kind of like we did this time? Save that money in the fifth year, you'd have about $2 million in there, and then put that towards that fund balance?
So part of
Instead of
that.
$6 million, then we'd be at approximately $4 million.
So the only reason that we're here this evening is because part of that WIFA request was identifying how that $400,000 was going to be used. And back in February, council had said, we're going to use that to
Okay.
reduce the sewer rates.
Okay.
And so WIFA actually at their board meeting had asked me, is it council's intent to reduce the sewer rates? And I had said yes, based on the February conversation.
Okay.
So it doesn't mean that we can't go back and say, hey, we would rather fund our capital improvements program. We can probably do that as well, but just, that's where we are this evening.
I just wondered what the savings would be. I mean, $3 a month is just, you can get a hamburger, I guess, with it, you know.
See, and that's
I'd like to earn more.
part of my concern. I understand the 400,000 and meeting that piece of the requirement. What drove me is at the end of 2016 with a 8.2 million, something like that, fund balance, realizing we had a prepayment in July, so that shows in 17. But we actually had a funding balance before that transaction greater than the total expenses of the next year were. It was 7.6 or something like that. So we had developed quite a reserve. So it gets into the question I think we're coming from is we still have a significant balance. We look at the capital improvement and what's the trade-off? Is it really necessary to do those projects? Or can we reduce the rates a little bit more on that side of the factor, realizing that we do have to pay back the 400,000?
I can look into that and get that more information from the city engineer and the public works director on those projects.
Personally, I'm in favor of the option that they chose. However, when it was first being discussed, I find it disheartening that not everybody gets to participate in this. Our commercial water users pay more than what our residential users use. So to me, they should get a reduction as well. And I know that's not the option that was picked. And $3 a month, I mean, you could use trickle-down economics and say, well, they'll have more money in their pocket to go buy commercial services, but $3 a month really doesn't cut it, so.
Okay. understand.
I do think somehow, I would like to see if there was a way to get commercial users in here as well.
And I think another factor is when we are looking at the city of Kingman is what, 34.13 square miles, and our water service area is what, 72 square miles, which brings us out to the airport, which brings us out to not only our current commercial customers, but for potential new businesses. So I think you do have a valid point, and I think that's one of the reasons that I really want to look into the second piece besides the 400,000 as to the capital program need versus can we do something else for the commercial and the residential customers in a rate.
Because at this point, our commercial customers bear a greater burden than our residential customers, especially when you look at how much they're paying for 1,000 gallons of water.
I think I wouldn't have a problem with option 5 if we do something additional for reduction in rates to both commercial and residential.
Yeah, I would agree.
I agree with that because commercial uses a lot of water, and if you're going to promote conservation, then I think you should include them to get the best benefit of your conservation.
Mr. Doherty?
I would concur with the three of you. When I have talked with prospects, working with Bob Riley, some of their comments are always, boy, you got really high sewer rates. So I think anything we can reduce that will help us get further businesses into this community.
I agree.
I can understand trying to help them out, but let's be real about it. As a commercial business, you pass on all your costs to your customer. So the residential customer, in a roundabout way, pays twice. Once for their own, and then once when they go to purchase a product produced by the business. If we can find a way to do it, yeah. But I think the intent originally was to help our residential customers with this reduction.
I think we should try to incentivize anyone and everyone to include our commercial customers to use less as well. If they can sell their product for less, they will sell more.
Well, since it's the winter quarterly average, my family ain't taking a shower till January, so we're going to cut down on the water.
You just run out on the golf course there while it's...
Hey, I got this sprinkler time. Outside, guys.
So if we include the commercial users, we need to know that that residential rate is also going to, they will not receive the full 17% reduction or 95 cents because right now it's being, that full $400,000 is being allocated strictly to the residences. Okay.
What is the distribution, you had on a prior chart, commercial revenue versus residential revenue?
Oh, man, I should have that down. I don't have that answer for you off the top of my head. I know that commercial usage revenue is more than residential revenue. I don't know what that, what
so
that ratio is.
$3 would go down to probably less than $1.50 if we did it equally.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I do understand both sides, and that's why I would like to look at that, the other aspect in November. Do you need an answer right now on the 400, or?
I think just maybe some guidance. I'll need to put together an ordinance, I know, and so I'll need to publish the
I do have a comment. If it is by usage, if we take the number 5, then the more water they conserve, the more they're going to benefit. So it won't just be like $1 across the
No, it
She
will
said
be more.
$4 and something max. I asked
It
her.
could be more if they conserve.
Oh, did you?
Right,
Well, I asked what the
right.
potential was, and you said
Yeah.
$4.
Well, I based it on current usage today, and going through 21, more conservation through fiscal year 21. So $42 to $45. It won't vary by much, yeah. But $42 to $45 is my
And that's per
projection.
year.
And that's per year.
Per year, yeah.
But it is incentive for conservation,
But
which
of
we do need
course,
to do that.
$1 more.
this is all draw through the meter, which means this is what we're getting from the aquifer, as opposed to other options that we need to work with the contractors on, gray water, things like that, and I guess reassessing, and Mr. Doherty and I were brainstorming, which is trouble for everybody, of the reclaimed water. Do we have a vision to that? Do we have a strategy for that? What is our strategy for management of water in the future, realizing we can control that resource as opposed to the aquifer, and depending on what controls the county puts on, that we would subject ourselves to. So that's planning in the future, but I think it's something we need to look forward to. But, obviously the gray water and even the septic systems, there's a way of taking that and reusing some of the septic system too.
Is there a timeline with WIFA to make a decision about how to reutilize this?
They did not give me a timeline. I would guess that first year, this year, we're going to experience that savings. So I would think that they would want to have some sort of decision. We don't have to go back to WIFA and provide any sort of information to them. This was just, they wanted us to identify so they would approve or not approve our request. So my opinion is that we're recognizing that $400,000 savings this year. So at some point this year, we should come up with a decision.
If we were to table this evening, would that impact or affect the balance of the proposed sewer rate reduction timeline, the November 15th public hearing date, and the January 1st effective date?
It would push everything off by a month.
It would.
Well, from what I'm hearing, you've got time to do some strategic planning with Public Works and the Sewer and Water Department to present something at your budget meetings.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great idea.
Any additional questions for Director Moline?
I just have a comment that I think it's imperative that we do something, because the reduction of the WIF alone was based on our word saying this is what we would do with it. And I think it's important that we stick to our word.
Thank you.
And it would probably be a lot easier if the rates were effective in January than in February. And I understand that.
Can that happen if this is pushed back a month?
February 1st would then be the effective date.
She said that.
I would like to suggest that we revisit this to look at what option 5 would look like if we included commercial customers as well. I'm willing to push it a month because I believe everybody should join in on, everybody that puts into should get something out of.
Okay.
Is that a form of a motion?
Sure. Let's motion that. Want me to restate that?
Could you restate the motion for us, please?
I can state it again if you'd like. I make a motion to table this until next month to get a recommendation of option 5 to include commercial residents or commercial business as well as residential customers.
Next month or next meeting?
Next month. Well, I don't think we need next meeting. If they're ready next meeting, that's fantastic, but no more than 30 days. How's that?
Okay.
I'll second.
No more than 30 days, right?
Right.
Okay. Any further discussion? Please call for the vote. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, we'll move on to item 7, reports. Any meetings this past month?
Well, I attended the Municipal Utilities Commission and the EDMC, and items of significance were discussed tonight, so.
And thank you for covering for the municipal utilities for me.
No problem.
Okay.
I attended the Historic Preservation Commission, and I'm very sad to report that the chair, Laura Hansen, is going to be moving to Utah. And so there will be forthcoming to the council after there is kind of a promotion to get applications, a new person for the commission. There was a lot of discussion, and again, I expect that in short order, I don't know what that is exactly, but the landmark building program will be coming to council. I think it looks like it's a positive thing because all members of the commission last night were supporting it. So a lot going on there.
Go on to item 8 and announcements. Mr. Doherty.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to thank Josh Noble and Nick Bowers for being the tip of the spear on the great work that was done on the Best of the West. A lot of city departments, Public Works, police, fire, all contributed, as well as a couple of volunteers who are in here tonight who coordinate getting those volunteers available for this. I heard nothing but great things. We had a meeting today to go through what went right and what went wrong, and next year's will be even better because we're starting today to do it. The fire department will be changing dispatch for paramedic response to be a medical priority dispatch system. This is more of a national system, and the fire department, the fire chief has found that we send the big rug trucks on a lot of calls that are unnecessary to send paramedics to, that they should just be answered by AMR. And so when a call comes in, dispatch will go through a list of questions to see what really needs to be dispatched rather than automatically sending paramedics. This Friday night, October 7th, is the Pink Heels Block Party in the downtown between 3rd and 5th. That is from 5:30 to 9, and that's a fundraiser for the Kingman Cancer Care Unit. Chillin' on Beale will be October 15th from 5 to 8. Also on October 15th, the Rattler Mountain Bike Race will be at Monolith Gardens and Coyote Pass Trailhead. In discussions with the mountain bike group, they want to make it bigger and bigger, and when we get the arch put up on Beale Street, that's where they want to start it from in the future. And then let's see, the last thing I have, you'll notice on your city county magazine that the powerhouse is on the front page, and the historic electric vehicle museum is inside and listed as a great museum in Arizona to visit. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Great.
Councilman Miles?
All I wanted to say is our police department's had a rough month, and I hope that our locals will support our police department. They need it. We need to support them, not only locally, but nationwide, and they've had a rough month, so let's support them and do what we can to make their job easier.
I second that motion.
Councilman Carver?
Nothing here?
I'm good.
Well, I also want to thank those who helped put on the Best of the West event. It was very popular. I also want to thank the Parks and Recs and everyone that was involved with the parade. It was a great parade, and I thought it was a little bigger this year, and I thought the reroute and shortening the route did make it flow better this year. So I want to thank everybody for that.
That's great.
I also want to say that I thought the city did an excellent job with Best of the West. It
Yes.
was our second year. I saw a tremendous improvement.
Big improvement.
Communications and coordination between the Kingsman and the city were better this year than last year, and I think that will continue to improve. Also, our people in blue, and I'll also say our fire department, we never know when either of those folks or groups are going to be involved in something, so I always pray for them. Some of you know I have been summoned for federal grand jury duty in Phoenix for the month of October. I called in last Saturday, and they said, you're qualified, so they don't think I'm too old or decrepit yet, but that they didn't need me this week, but I have to call in each Saturday to find out, so I may or may not be at council meetings or whatever. And also as part of that, I am currently planning, and I believe in discussions I had with Councilmember Miles that we're going to try to attend the ADOT board meeting down in Wickenburg near the end of the month. It's something that we're doing on a regular basis now to remind them that Kingman does exist. We are, and the county is going to be part of the 150 miles of I-11 in Mojave County, and 92 miles of Interstate 40 in Mojave County. They need to take care of us. So with that, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion, a second. All in favor? Voice vote. Aye.
Aye.